And what is up? Welcome in Monday episode of GC Live. Wes Mitchell here. Chris Clark. Show is presented as always by our good buddy Clint Hammond of the Mortgage Network, ClintHammond.com, 803-771-6933. Of course, if you're in the market for a new home, give Clint a call. He can help walk you through that process. And NMLS number, you would think I would have memorized by now. 71597 Hammond at mortgagenetwork.com is the email address. Chris, what do you want to talk about?
Nothing to talk about. Nothing going on. Nothing happened. No, man. Interesting. Here we go with the comments. Interesting weekend for South Carolina, right? I mean, there's actually a lot to talk about.
Yeah, let's talk about what is on everyone's mind today. Let's get right to it. The firing of Brian Harsin.
All right, yes.
So,
but you're going to say Halloween candy?
Yeah, we talked about Halloween candy for a good solid 15 minutes, I think, on the 107.5 show. But yeah, no, we're here to talk about to serve as your, I would say, GC therapist on what happened on Saturday. Obviously, South Carolina losing 23-10 to Missouri. Let down, of course, game. Beamer even said it in the press conference right after the game. And I was curious to see, Chris, what his take was going to be. It felt just flat to me, like right off the bat. And I don't really like that take. Normally when people say that, like when people, I've talked about this before. Like when people look at a baseball team not performing, they're like, oh, they're just sitting in the dugout. They don't look like they care. And I'm like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But, it just watching from the stands, it just felt flat in the first quarter. And sometimes it's just performance. Like it's not really that you're flat. It's just you're not playing well. But just from where I was sitting, it just felt like it was almost, in Preston, I thought Preston Thorne framed it up pretty well this morning when he said basically that you only have so much energy to exert. It felt kind of like last week was this huge emotional exertion. And then it felt like this week, everybody from the players to the fans just kind of struggled to get back that extra edge that they had the week before.
I mean, Beamer said it in his presser, man, while we're talking about his post-game comments. He said that the team laid an egg. And that is pretty much what it was. I mean, there's no sugarcoating it. It was interesting, Wes, to kind of listen to his comments on Saturday and then listen to his comments on Sunday. There were some, I don't want to say consistent versus inconsistent. The messaging was consistent, but there was kind of a difference in tone, right? Some of the subject matter was different, and we can dive into that. Some of that was a lot more big picture stuff. Some of it just related to the game. But yeah, I mean, they didn't play well. They didn't look prepared. They didn't catch any breaks. They lost the turnover margin again. Not only did they not just have it even like it was against A&M in Kentucky, but they lost it. They didn't make the small plays. The simple stuff looked incredibly difficult. Missouri looked like they had 15 guys out there on defense most of the game. The defense was pretty bad in the first. I mean, there's no way else to say it. The defense was pretty bad the first half. Missouri had a great game plan, and Missouri had a great game plan defensively, and South Carolina evidently did not, because they didn't have a lot of running room. They were under constant duress. And then I think on top of that, just didn't make a lot of one-on-one plays. Some of South Carolina's best plays were, outstanding individual efforts. You can think about a couple plays that Spencer Rattler made, Austin Stogner. Think about when Marshawn Lloyd was in there, a couple individual plays that he made. But nothing clicked in the game. And I thought, whether you want to say it was flat, laid an egg, whatever it was, it just it was not a good performance. And I think, Wes, and I'm getting a little bit bigger picture here, and I'll shut up in a sec. Last year, after the Kentucky game, remember South Carolina loses the Kentucky game 16-10, and it was an incredibly disappointing game. After that, South Carolina alternated wins and losses for the rest of the season, which tells you two things. Number one, Shane Beamer did a good job of not letting his team fold, keeping things together, keeping his team close, but also the other side of that it was a wildly inconsistent team. We saw that all year. This year, the goal was to become more consistent, and I think we have seen that to a degree. Again, this team had won 4 straight games. They had won back-to-back games. Big question for me was, can you take that emotional high against Kentucky and then go beat Texas A&M at home in a highly anticipated game? They did, and credit them for that. But then you come out in this game where there's a lot of anticipation, a lot of fans wanting this game so badly to get bowl eligible, break another streak, do some things that haven't been done in a while around here, and then you come out flat and lay an egg. So that was an incredibly disappointing, part of it, I think.
Yeah, man, and I think you look at this game, and it's kind of like we framed it up. This is another opportunity. This is an opportunity to show you've made progress as a program, show that you can handle that high from last week against A&M, and show you can come out there and perform again. And obviously that did not happen. And so, I think obviously getting this out of the way is just very disappointing for the fans. Like I get the frustration. I think you look, and Missouri just had an excellent game plan. And, I thought Missouri offensively, and a little bit of this is going to be carryover from what we talked about this morning on 107.5, but offensively, I think they knew they weren't going to have to score 35 points to win this game. So I think they went in and they worked their plan to a T, and they said, we're not letting our guy get hit. Like they put in a very, I don't want to say simple, because I think simple is probably an insult to it, because it had some layers to it, but it was not a difficult to execute plan. It did a good job of attacking South Carolina on the edges multiple ways, did a good job of mixing in the quarterback run enough to where South Carolina had to at least acknowledge Brady Cook in the running game. And I thought most importantly for them, it really put Carolina's front, which has been really, really good the last few weeks at putting pressure on the quarterback, getting hits on the quarterback. It put them in a position where they had to hesitate, where they had to play the run. And even when they got in 3rd and long, Chris, even, early in this game, it's 3rd and 9. What do? They clearly had this installed for this exact situation. They motion everybody to the left. 4 eligible receivers are to the left. They isolate their receiver on the right. They throw a quick screen out there, and he gets basically 9 yards on 3rd and 9 and gets the first down. And, the very first 3rd and long of the game, crowd is into it. Missouri's backed up. They don't even attempt to get the first down. They just run the ball in this situation. So, they run the ball and essentially are like, we're okay punting. And I think they knew they were up against an offense that was not probably going to put up a bunch of points. So they just said, our entire plan is going to be to not get our guy hit, to be methodical, to run our offense, and we're going to be okay with the results. And that's exactly what happened. Well, because they did that, that opened up some throws down the field. They were able to use some play action on 1st and 2nd on I have to pass downs. It worked to perfection. South Carolina, on the other hand, got their quarterback hit, couldn't run the football, was in must-pass situations where Missouri, who had a very good, we knew coming in, defensive front, they were able to do exactly what they've done most of the year and pin their ears back and go hit your quarterback.
Yeah, I think South Carolina was just on its heels the entire game. Going in, you kind of thought, okay, South Carolina should have the advantage on Missouri in special teams, and they should have the advantage on Missouri when they're on defense and Missouri's on offense. Because, again, Missouri's offense has not been good this year. They have not. Statistically, eyeball tests, they've not been good. The question, it seemed, was kind of Missouri probably has the advantage defensively against South Carolina. So can South Carolina turn that around, and can they indeed win those other two areas? As it turns out, special teams was basically a wash, I think. And then Missouri was better in the other two phases of the game, and markedly so. So, early in the game, Missouri goes up 17-0. They've got South Carolina on their heels because they're mixing things up between run and pass and vertical routes and sideways stuff and quarterback run and running the football, being patient, effectively administering the offense and not turning it over, just being very efficient. And then, defensively, just really getting after South Carolina. And South Carolina offense just kind of looked, it looked like they were kind of just having to pull things out of desperation at times, quite frankly. Just kind of grab bag, nothing's working, to the extent that they got a couple things going. I remember there was a stretch where I think they hit Xavier Legette or Juice Wells or maybe one of the other on a couple of like quick hitters where they gained some yardage, but then you run the football and it's -4. They just couldn't get anything going. Couple of turnovers. One of them was inconsequential from the fact that Missouri missed a field goal after one of them, but just couldn't get anything going, man. So incredibly disappointing performance overall from what we saw on Saturday.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I don't know. It's. I mean, we're going to try to break down the game. It gets to a point, though. I know y'all, the fans, don't necessarily even want to hear it. But Chris, I thought it just felt like everything, and some of it, obviously, a lot of it was self-inflicted. But a great football team, a really good football team, can have one of those days where it just feels like everything's going wrong. And to me, it just felt like every time South Carolina was about to get into some rhythm, something bad happened. Even something as small as like on offense, they get in some rhythm, maybe try to introduce a little bit of extra up-tempo stuff, and either Carolina has a guy hurt or Missouri has a guy hurt, so it just stops the action. And it was like every single time, it looks like they've got the big interception, DQ Smith. This is not the reason they lost the game, but let me just say that's one of the worst calls all season long. If anything, when I saw the flag come out, Chris, and I had a perfect view of that play. When I saw the flag come out, I was like, I told somebody near, I was like, no, they're going to call offensive PI. There's no way this is defensive PI. And of course, it ended up being defensive pass interference. I'm like, I have no idea how. Like the offensive player, you had two Carolina defenders there, both going for the football. DQ never even touched the guy, and Spalding got drugged down by their receiver. So, when that play happened though, when he made the pick, I was like, that feels like a play that can maybe turn the momentum of this game. And again, not that call is not why they lost, but
No. It was bad.
Putting it out there. That was.
I went back and watched that earlier today. The official had his hand on his flag, pulling it out when the ball was still in the air. I mean, ball was not there yet. It was pretty bad. But yeah, you're right. I mean, your point is very valid. Had the same thought. There are two different points in the game, and I didn't write them down. I made a mental note in my head. I'm like, you got to remember the time on the clock. And I feel like one was in the third quarter, one was in the fourth quarter, where you're going, is Missouri going to do a Missouri that we've seen this season? Because, again, they have found so many ways to lose games this year, and they just never did. You're just waiting, you're waiting and waiting, and eventually the clock gets zero. They just haven't had enough time. So Missouri played a clean game. South Carolina did not. And your point, Wes, about – let me adjust my camera. Sorry, guys. Your point about great teams being able to survive something about this. I mean, look at the Georgia game. I mean, Georgia was number one at the time. They're playing in Columbia, Missouri. Really could have lost. If you want to say should have lost, whatever. Missouri has a 1st and goal from like the 1 yard line, and they don't walk away with a touchdown in that situation because they false started. So Missouri, Georgia had 4 turnovers in that game. They played pretty poorly. They won. They were able to eke out a win. South Carolina is not a program that can do that. I always talk about the low margin for error. We expected this to be a tight ball game. South Carolina was going to have to play well to win. Just because they beat Kentucky and A&M doesn't mean they had arrived and they'd be able to walk in against Missouri and just play okay and win. Even though, notwithstanding Missouri's record, that's a good enough team to beat you if you don't play well, and some things bounce their way. And so that's kind of exactly what happened. Not only did South Carolina just not play well, they played pretty poorly for most of the game.
Yeah, and it's easy to say, my thought was, Missouri didn't turn the football over because they're sort of playing from a point of strength the entire game. They had the lead. They were in control. But even last week, I mean, they they played Vanderbilt and they had a 17-0 lead in that game and still had their share of mistakes and let Vanderbilt back in the game. And actually, Vandy had a shot to maybe to go win the thing and was not able to do it. But, I'm with you. I kept waiting. I was like, is Missouri going to do something that like turns this game? Like even some of where they ended up just getting, settling for field goals. I was like, this would be the time that Missouri throws a pick six or has a fumble that goes back the other way and just completely changes the game. And that just never happened. To give them credit, that never happened. Again, they had a great game plan. Not to get too deep into this because it doesn't really matter, but they did some things on defense, Chris, that I haven't really seen many or any of South Carolina's opponents do this year. And a lot of the times they were able to do it because South Carolina was in such third and long situations, like passing situations. But they sort of brought back that some teams used to call it like the amoeba defense, the amoeba front.
Yeah.
Did you see one of the plays where they like 2 of their defensive linemen, they like dropped them off the line of scrimmage, almost like to the depth of linebackers,
Yeah.
just so they could get ahead of steam and just go flying forward? Did you see that?
I did. And it worked.
If you think about it, if you have a full head of steam running into somebody who's standing there.
Standing still. No, that's a tough ask. And they've got number 9 just completely wrecked shop on. I mean, there was one sack of Spencer Rattler where he ran right through the offensive line and a back and sacked Spencer Rattler. So it was like a 3-for-1 for that guy. That they're good up front, and they cause a lot of issues. And South Carolina certainly didn't help itself with how they played or how the game was administered. This is one like I've almost like I'm still trying to craft my insider report, my post-game insider report, which will be now 48 hours probably eventually by the time I get it out, Wes. And I'm spending more time talking about big picture stuff really in this one because you kind of see the game. Some games you're trying to figure out what went wrong. It was kind of everything, like offensively, if you're trying to figure out where to lay blame, like it was just kind of everything, right? And I think, whether you want to talk about, well, why was South Carolina running this or why did this person not play or Marshawn Lloyd couldn't play because he got banged up, which is obviously an issue for this team, and the quarterback play and the play calling, like all of that just combined into one very, very imperfect storm for South Carolina.
Yeah, everything went wrong, and they did no favors for themselves to try and fix it. And they tried to fix it, but could not fix it. Obviously, I get the frustration with offensive side of the ball, offensive coordinator, Mark Satter. Like I get it, guys. I get the frustration. Has the offense been good enough? Absolutely not. Like we get it. We're tired of talking about it too, frankly. We're not going to sit here and say it's been good enough when it has not. Beamer was asked about it in his teleconference yesterday, Chris, and very quickly he was asked, have there been conversations about making a change at offensive play caller? And, he very succinctly, very quickly said nope. So now I will say this, Chris. I mean, guys, this is not something, if there's a change, if there's not a change, timing wise, like I don't think this is something that's going to play out in the public arena. If they've had, especially the way it was asked, if they've had a conversation about that, he's not going to be like, oh yeah, I told him if it doesn't get better, I'm going to fire you next week. Like that's not going to, I don't think that's going to be Beamer or pretty much any coach's MO to that question. I don't think he's going to just throw one of his coordinators under the bus publicly. While obviously, he's going to have some decisions to make at some point this season or postseason.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting, Wes. Did you see what Mark Stoops said today? That was kind of unexpected. So, asked about play calling, and I couldn't figure out was whether he was talking about himself or Rick Scangarello. I always have trouble saying his name, his offensive coordinator. And he was asked about that and basically said something like, I know it hadn't been good enough. It's got to get a lot better or you won't last. And I'm like, are you talking about the offensive coordinator? You talk about yourself. But look, here's something important to remember, and I'm having light issues today, so y'all bear with me. I think it's important, and I'm writing about this afternoon, to know how Shane Beamer views his program and what it wants to be. So he's going to focus on positives. He's going to project confidence in everything. And I think what people look, you should not be surprised that a coach, that you're right, no coach is going to say, yeah, man, I'm really thinking about it. I'm probably going to pull that trigger. Not going to say that. Reporters are going to ask that because we're at the point in the season, if things aren't going well, where it gets asked. We've seen that. We've seen it with Steve Spurrier. Who's calling plays? What you going to do about it? We've seen it with Will Muschamp multiple times. Are you going to change play callers? Have you thought about it? What about the offense? And now, we're seeing it with Beamer. And it's almost kind of like a box check, right? Like you got to ask it, and then the coach is going to say some form of no, or we'll talk about that later, or whatever it may be. I think what people are maybe concerned about, Wes, is like how he said it, right? But again, I kind of go back to the fact of, number one, like you said, Shane Beamer is not the type of guy where he's going to say, yeah, I think we'll probably make a change. He's not going to do that. And number two, he is somebody who's going to project that confidence. He's very much we're a team. We win and lose as a team. That's why you see when he's asked about the offense, he's going to bring in the defense and special teams and how they have to play better. If he's asked about a single player, he's going to say we got to play better around that player. He's always going to bring things back to the team, and that's just how he is. And I think that's just what he wants to project to his team, what he wants to project to the public. People don't need to take him saying that, however he said it, whatever was the tone. They don't need to take that after the Missouri loss on Sunday night to mean that he will not ever make a change, because those are two totally and completely different conversations.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Before we get any further, going to tell you about our friends at Liberty Tax, 803-462-5576. It is not tax season yet, but Liberty Tax can help you with several different things, even in the tax off season, especially if you own a business. If you need someone to handle your payroll services, your bookkeeping services, they have a QuickBooks Pro advisor on staff. Tax team at Liberty Tax has locations at Irmo, Columbia, Lexington, 1123 South Lake Drive. That's Lexington, 7467 St. Andrews Road in Irmo, and 551 St. Andrews Road in Columbia. Again, 803-462-5576. Shout out to Larry. Appreciate those folks being a supporter of the show here on GC Live. Chris, let's talk a little bit of recruiting, man. We'll go back to the game, I guess, to finish it off here at the end. But Elijah Davis coming in. Sounds like that visit went well. And he's obviously, for those who don't know, JUCO kid, originally from Wagner Sally here in South Carolina, is off at East Mississippi Community College. And someone that really has kind of blown up since he got out there. Alabama, Tennessee, the other schools, other major schools that are involved. Gamecocks getting him on his official visit this past weekend. That was his first official of the process. But Chris, I continue to hear that South Carolina is in really good shape here.
Well, we know that the Gamecocks are going to lose Zach Pickens, another former Palmetto State product, after this season, going on to the NFL, and obviously he's played quite well this year. So there's an opportunity for some early playing time there. You would think Tonka Hemingway, Boogie Huntley will be the guys that are expected to be the main ones there, but they'll need some more depth there. They'll need some guys to step up with some more playing time. And Elijah Davis is someone that's really been on our radar for quite a while, Wes, since he was in high school. You're right. He's gone out to junior college, really continued to develop, someone that the staff has really targeted under Beamer for quite a while to bring in. And things seem to be going very well there. Always good to be able to obviously recruit on the line of scrimmage. South Carolina's got a pretty good class going in terms of, you look at their defensive line prospects, their offensive line prospects, clear that they want to add talent there. And Davis would be another really quality acquisition there if they can finish that one off.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Zach Pickens. I think that's the message here is, hey, come in, be the guy, be the man. You add someone with a little bit more, just physical maturity than if you were just bringing in a high school guy, and someone that has absolutely, just blown up in the recruiting process once he got there. He says he's going to official to Alabama, official to Tennessee. Those are not set up at this point. Wants to decide in November. So, basically, it seems like the process is kind of coming to an end. We'll see if he takes officials to either of those schools coming up here soon or not. But it'll be very, very interesting to follow there. But I think Gamecocks are in pretty good spot, and they have been for a while. I think getting back home, it sounds like, is a desirable thing for Elijah. Chris, I guess let's give a few final thoughts on the game.
You sound so thrilled about doing it.
Well, let's call it what it is, man. I love my job, but I love my job so much more when people are like engaged and excited and like to hear about it, like to talk about it. It's monotonous when it's like offense stinks, and then everybody has a hot take, and it really, Frank, it's not. Here's the thing. This is as long as I've been following South Carolina football, as long as I have been covering South Carolina football, there is one thing that I have learned has been true for the entire time. And that is, and this really applies to every team in the world that has ever played football. Your team is not ever as good as you think they are after a big win, and they're not ever as bad as you think they are after a loss. Like, it really is always so. Like, we got people on here saying no way that South Carolina beats Vandy. Probably some of the same people who, after the first few games, were saying, this team will struggle to win 4 games. Like, it's every single game ultimately does stand on its own merit. South Carolina found a way to win against Kentucky and A&M, played well enough to win. They found a way to not play well this week. And I think fan bases struggle to sort of, pair together. Okay, my team did not play well at all this week versus what's happening overall in the season. And, they're 5-3. If they bounce back, go take care of business against Vanderbilt, which I admit is probably going to be a pretty ugly game, but South Carolina should win. They get to 6-3. You can salvage things and try to finish the season on a high note. Now, if we're talking big picture, I get it. Again, I'll say it 100 times. Offense struggles there. I get it. I'm with y'all. Anybody frustrated with the offensive output, you have a case, you have a point. If I was, just Gamecock fan commenting as well, I would feel the exact same way. So, Yeah, that's where I am on the whole thing. But it just when Carolina loses and it's for the same reasons, it does get monotonous.
All of the points that have been made, I think I don't say all the dialogue that I've seen for the most part has been very fair criticisms of things after the game, deservedly so. There's not much gray area on that performance, Wes. It's not a great team that you played. You looked unprepared. You looked flat. You laid an egg. All those things. Also unfair, and I think if I had to guess, Wes, I think there's some frustration on the part of Shane Beamer in that losing this game, it's almost like people have forgotten the 2 weeks before that. That's also fair, right? Like if you feel that way within the program as the coach or as a player or player's parent or whoever, I think it's fair to feel that way too. But let me give the great, one of the biggest cliches I'll ever give on the show. South Carolina can't let that game beat them twice. You got to go and play Vandy. Shane Beamer talked on Sunday during his teleconference about how much energy they had during practice and how it's one of the most energetic practices he's ever had. Well, we saw last year they were able to follow up some bad losses with some good performances and some wins. You can say, oh, well, it was against Auburn, it was against Florida. They were reeling. Well, South Carolina was a reeling program too, and they found a way to do it. Credit them for that. Can you go and do that? You've got actually, Wes, not just one, but two quite winnable games back to back. You go to at Vandy, go at Florida. I don't think Florida's that great. That's very much a toss-up game. Florida probably favored, if I had to guess. Not by a lot. But that's a winnable game. And then, of course, you got two kind of doozies there at the end of the year. But you still have a chance for a good year. I think people's kind of micro concerns about what they saw in Missouri and some of the other games are very fair. And I think projecting it forward and looking at the big picture of, will South Carolina be able to take advantage this season, given how much they lose off this team? Will they be able to take advantage in recruiting? New transfer portal window, Wes, opens in early December, 45 days. Will South Carolina be able to take advantage then? Because that's going to be a critical part of recruiting. How does the offensive output and how recruits and transfers view the offense in the program in general? How does that affect things? Those are very, very valid and fair concerns, and a lot left to play out, here at the end of the year.
Yeah, and it's Chris going to be a madhouse.
Completely
that
insane
window, that transfer portal window. I mean,
yeah.
So and you have now you have, I guess, your first major. Well, I guess Arizona State was probably the first major coaching firing of the season. So
Nebraska.
Nebraska too. Yeah, that's a pretty big one. Point being, it's already starting, and when those two things now will forever be tied together in that when you have coaching changes, a bunch of guys hit the portal, and a bunch of guys are going to hit the portal regardless of if their coaches leave or not for every reason you can think of. But here's the thing: you better be situated right to be able to take advantage. If you're not one of the teams losing a bunch of guys, you better be in a situation to take advantage of those teams and go sign difference makers.
Absolutely. I mean, South Carolina's they've done some good work on the recruiting trail, the high school, the junior college ranks in this class. But again, let's take out any staffing moves right now. You've got a lot of work to do to bring talent into this program because of what you lose off of this year's team. There are some guys that'll have decisions. There's some very key, swing guys, I guess you could call them in this class. There's some guys that we know are going to be gone, and there are a lot of those, and there are a lot of impactful ones at that. So you've got to stock not only high school and junior college, but transfer portal recruiting. We've reported this many times on GamecockCentral.com is going to be critical in this class. And so I think the way you put it is perfect. You need to be set up and well situated to pounce when the time is right. You can't wait around because it's going to be a complete madhouse.
We got some takes in the chat today, y'all. I don't even think I'm going there though. So what you got any final thoughts on the game, Chris? This is gonna be a short show. I don't care. It's gonna be short.
No. Let's I think the game we're about tapped out on. The game itself. There's a lot big picture to discuss. I feel like that's where we're going to end up most of this week. We're of course going to talk about Vandy eventually. We'll get there. But Vandy and big picture, seems like everybody wants to flush the Missouri game, and I'm fine. The people have spoken, Wes. Let's flush it.
Yeah, the people have spoken. We're going to listen. That's it for today. We'll be back. Mike Uva weighing in. He'll be on here on Tuesday evening. Chris and I will be back on Wednesday. We'll try to get a Vandy guest. How about that? Very winnable game for South Carolina. A good opportunity to bounce back. And we'll see what happens from there. All right. Appreciate y'all joining in. Appreciate y'all tuning in. The support, as always, has been great. Y'all have a good one. We'll reconvene later this week.